Hey everybody, Silent Valor here. I'm here playing Mandragora. Just wanted to kind of bring you a video talking about the Flameweaver. And kind of like just give you some build ideas, kind of like what I did as I was playing through the game. I have beat the game. I didn't have too many problems. I felt like the build was pretty strong throughout most of the game. I'll kind of point out where I think this um, this class and playstyle maybe was like a little bit weaker, kind of in the mid game, where I started to struggle maybe a little bit more. But then it picks up and becomes really strong at the end of the game. It's pretty solid in the early game. But yeah, I'm just gonna start off with the skill tree, kind of show you guys what I did. So obviously you're starting Flameweaver, and I'd say the way I pathed pretty early is the first keystone. So as you see, you don't really have a lot of like freedom with how your stats turn out when you're pathing to a lot of these things. So you kind of just take what you get and then work with that, right? So the big ones you want to look at is just like which keystones are important here, right? And I'm calling these kind of bigger nodes. I'm just calling those keystones. So I'd say for the Flameweaver, the ones you want to start with is, I think, burn chance. It's pretty big, right? Getting your burn chance up, it's going to be like 0 at the beginning. And so you want to just get some burn chance, because now anytime you do any fire damage of any kind, there's chance you'll apply burns. And that's pretty important because there's a lot of interactions with burns in this tree, as well as just it actually does a fair bit of damage as well. So whenever you can get burn chance, that's what you want, and it also extends the duration. So as you can see, I kind of just pathed up here, and I went straight for Burning Blood. This is actually a pretty big game changer throughout most of the game. It is really effective, I'd say, earlier on. A little bit later it becomes less effective just because enemies will hit you so hard that you don't really have a lot of chance to get a lot of it back. But over the course of a game, this is just a game changer. You'll end up saving a lot of health and health potions because of this passive. So I'd say it's pretty high priority. From here, I also came up and grabbed this one, called Controlled Explosion, pretty early, because this is also very effective early on. Because as you might know if you've started playing already, even if you're going for like more of a mage play style, you're going to be using your light attack a lot. So this is going to be triggering all the time. It does have a little bit of a delayed, like you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, I'm building up. It's exploding. It does have a little bit of a delay, so it can be a little bit, hard to time sometimes, because I was finding a lot of times I'd like get it built up, but then I was having to dodge away and wasn't getting it. But you can, it will do damage while you're dodging, so you can like dodge through enemies. So it's just a nice one. It adds some damage, and I'd say it's pretty effective earlier on, maybe drops off a little later. From there, I actually kept going up this way. So earlier on, I'd say I wanted to lean a little bit more into the melee playstyle for 2 reasons. One, I like that melee playstyle, but also 2, in this game, you're going to be attacking a lot with your weapons. It's hard to get enough mana and mana regeneration to really rely heavily on spells early on in the game. So I kind of just went more to this right side of the tree to focus more on like what are some of these melee things, right? So this is a big one. Landing 3 attacks or 4 attacks will give you a pretty nice little attack speed buff. So this is just always up. It's just a nice little attack speed buff. It just really helps out with DPS throughout the game, and it synergizes with this. You're going to get a little bit more explosions off. So cool playstyle. And honestly, as you've probably noticed, that's one of the cooler things about the Flameweaver, and one of the reasons I started with it is because it has this really cool hybrid playstyle of being really effective in melee, while also having what I think are some of the strongest, if not the strongest spells in the game, late game. Chaos Weaver actually probably has maybe the like pretty strong spells. It's hard for me to say just because I haven't actually tried the other classes yet. But these spells hit very hard in the end game, and I'll kind of show you why. But earlier on, we're pathing up here. We're grabbing these nodes earlier on just to kind of embrace more of a melee playstyle. So from here, grabbing this is nice. It's just going to add a little bit of physical damage. It's not huge, but you're already up here. Might as well grab it. By the end of the game, you have a decent amount of constitution and defense, so it's going to add a little bit of damage. And from here, oh, something I do want to point out. When you're hitting these defensive nodes and offensive nodes, I actually choose power, not strength. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that there's actually a lot of power scaling weapons throughout the game. So as you are playing through the game, and when I say scaling, we're talking about this right here, right? The different scalings, right? These show the different attack stats, and they show you just how much damage you're getting from the stat, right? So if you're not familiar with how scaling works, so early on, Amnesia is like the weapon I used. It has a B+ scaling, and you get it like right at the very beginning of the game. It has innate fire damage already in there, right? And a B+ scaling in power, so it just scales better with power than it does with strength. On top of that, power is going to scale up this damage from your explosions, as well as all your spells. So I would just always take power. Anytime you have the option, power is your damage stat. I know you get a little bit of strength in here, and it's fine. I mean, it'll add a little bit of damage to some weapons, but honestly, power is where it's at. So going on from there, I'd say, yeah, pathing up here, grabbing these nodes, and you really want to make it up to Phoenix as soon as possible. Probably because this ability is just kind of a life changer for this game for two reasons. One, you come back to every, what is that, 5 minutes, it refreshes, and it'll save you from death. And I find, so funny enough, this triggers more when I fall to my death. There are so many points in this game with all the platforming where you just fall and die, and unfortunately, like, there's just falling to your death is an insta death, which I'm not a fan of. I do wish, like a lot of Metroidvania games, it's like when you fall, you don't just instantly die. You'll take some damage and then you'll get respawned. I do wish this game did that, but for now, this is how it is. You fall, you're dead. So Phoenix will like just save you from so many of those just random fall deaths, as well as triggering in battles. There's definitely some boss fights where it's like, I got hit, I died, and I came back, and the explosion killed the boss. So it's just easily one of the best quality of life keystones in the entire game. From there, once you hit this node, this is where you kind of have some options. You should be around level 25 after you reach up here. This is where you can start to multi-class. And this is where I'd say there's two really pathways I would go from here with the Flameweaver. Earlier on, I actually decided to lean a little more into just like combat. And so, because most of my damage was coming from physical attacks, I think the combat tree is great because of two things. First of all, you just get some really nice little passes up here. And I didn't take a lot here, but these things really help. So I didn't take Veteran, but Veteran is very good. If you path over here, it's going to be, an extra 4 points. But this extra 10% is pretty big, I think it would help out, but only if you get it early enough. I'd say once you hit level 25, immediately come over here and grab this because it takes a while to stack up. I think you're going to have to kill somewhere around 1,000 enemies before this is at max level, and that's a lot. I think I have, after finishing the game with my 35 hours or so that it took me to finish the game, I think I have maybe like 3,000 kills. So just put that into perspective. If it takes you 1,000 kills, you're getting this at level 25. if you don't take this right away, you're going to get no value out of it. So that's kind of why I skipped it, because I figured, you know, I was already kind of later into the game, and I didn't think I'd have enough time to really stack it up to max to where it's even really being effective. Obviously, if you start combat, you know, take it. It's great skill. 10% multiplier, right? It just makes every other point of concentration you put in, you know, 10% more effective. But the reason I went Warrior Tree is really just these two passives. Lifeblood Surge is just really nice. That 5% health really adds up as you're exploring. It just really, you know, just adds a lot of health over time. And then this is honestly just like, stamina is an issue in this game. You'll see with my inventory, with my gear, um, I ran these stamina and stamina regeneration for pretty much most of the game. I even used the stamina regen cloak for a long time, wherever it is, this one, just because, man, like, you run out of stamina pretty quick, and when you do, it can be kind of brutal to have to like sit there for the 2-3 seconds it takes. So this is huge because this is a multiplier. So again, every point of endurance you have is just going to become more effective because of this passive, as well as that stamina regen. So this was really a big deal for me because I spent so much time in combat, swinging my sword, rolling around. Honestly, this is a Dark Souls game, right? It's a Souls-like. You spam roll. That's your best defensive option. The shields in this game kind of suck. I never found that you could really effectively mitigate much damage. It just drained way too much stamina to block. Also, if you're running a shield, then, which the shields are pretty good, but the problem is then you can't cast spells. So I never really used shields. I pretty much ran a single hand with my little flame crest. From here, I'd say some other notable things, if you want to lean a little more heavily into this, is pathing up here and grabbing Iron Will. I think this is pretty effective weapon, or sorry, passive, just because you just get tankier as you get lower, and so it can kind of become in clutch here and there if you're able to block some, you know, just it might keep you alive. I think it's a pretty decent skill. And again, it's nice that even when you're hitting these offensive nodes here in the warrior tree, you can still choose power, which I would be doing for sure. Just keep stacking that power. It'll pay off in the end. I'll show you why. And then this one, coup de grace. This is a pretty crazy skill. 25% more damage is a lot, and it is only for enemies that are at 25% health, but still, if you're gonna path up here and grab these, I think they're well worth it. However, the other option, which is what I kind of went for around, I'd say kind of like the mid game, is I started to lean more heavily into spell casting. So earlier on, obviously, I'm picking a lot of these melee passives, taking a lot of the quality of life stuff. Oh, also, I don't think I mentioned, but path down here and grab Molten Strikes. This is actually a pretty big deal because it actually gives you a lot of flexibility with what weapon you use. And in this game, it can be hard to find good weapons, which was something I struggled with, especially in the mid game. And this is why I say the mid game was kind of tough for me, is because I didn't quite have the spell power for my spells to be really hitting very hard, and I also like hadn't found like a great weapon. So I was honestly just using like physical damage weapons that just had the highest base damage. I was using some two-handers and stuff like that, and so this just is really nice because it converts a lot of that damage over to fire. So you'll still be able to apply your burns, and you'll get the scalings of the fire increase once you get some armor and stuff that increases fire damage. So this is worth it, for sure, to pick up, because it just gives you flexibility. You can run any weapon. But in the mid game, that's when I shifted over and I started going more for spells. And I think the Chaos Tree is perfect for that, for a couple reasons. First of all, you get a lot of power nodes in here, and power is great. That's going to scale your damage on your spells and your late game weapons, right? I do grab weakness because you'll see weakness synergizes really well with these. And with around 20 to 25% burn chance, you really don't need like a ton of burn chance. I'd say once you're around 20% burn chance, it's actually, you actually kind of want more weakness, because this right here is just your fire and chaos damage are gonna, like, you just get a little bit bonus damage for both. So all your fire damage that you're dealing is now going to be doing just a little bit of bonus chaos damage, and all that chaos damage can apply weakness if you have weakness chance. So you want to grab this weakness ability right here. Move over here, and I like this one too. I grabbed this because when you do proc that weakness, which will happen even at 12%, it seems low, but it will happen, and it'll just make it so that they're actually going to take more fire damage, which is pretty big, a 10% multiplier on your fire damage. So I grabbed these, and then from here I pathed up and I grabbed this because this is just a fun little quality of life node. Just, you'll get these little things that spawn, you grab them, they restore some mana, give you a little shield. It's great. But this one right here is a big one. At the end game, near, like, you know, I'd say in the last third of the game, I started using spells a lot more. My spells were kind of starting to carry a lot of the damage rather than just my basic attacks. And honestly, this is just huge because it will ramp you up to 25% damage, and it does it pretty quick. After a couple spell casts, you'll pretty much be there, and your spells now just hit really hard. So I kind of leaned over here, kind of near the end game. This is where I came and grabbed. A lot of these other stuff are more chaos specific, which if you are doing a pure mage kind of playstyle, I'd probably say that chaos would be a better way to go, or even willed. But again, at that point, that's just an entirely different build. Over here, this is also where I would come back and I'd grab fire attunement. In fact, I'd probably grab this sooner. I'd say once you have maybe 20%, 15-20% burn chance, which you can get really easily, really early, this actually becomes really powerful. It doesn't look like a lot, but I'll show you. Let's see. Let's just cast a few spells. Alright, so there's my mana, right? Well, look at, it's regenning, right? This thing's on fire, and it's kind of ticking back up. And that's with only one enemy. If you had multiple burning enemies here, it would be going even faster. So it definitely adds up over time, and it kind of just allows you to use a lot of your spells just a lot more often without having to spam, you know, potions. So I like it a lot. It definitely it adds up. And then as we get even further into the end game, this is where I start to path over, and it's like, okay, well, I'm using a lot of spells, so let me grab this. This is pretty good. Just stacks your spell damage. This is pretty good. Spell resistances, or spells just hit a little harder. But that's more or less the build. From there, obviously, you can just keep going, and just, you know, you could path more into here. You could grab a few more in here. There's not a lot else in here that you can grab. I will say something that if you have extra points, or like say you don't want some of these, I'd say probably the most effective use to scale your damage is these critical nodes. These critical nodes, which I would take magic critical chance, right, are going to add a lot of damage. If you can get your magical crit up, I would say that's more effective than scaling power. But only if you can get kind of enough. I'd say only in the end game, because that's where you get like some good equipment that kind of gives you some magic crit. If you are going to scale power, though, I would take the power over here in this tree. And the reason for that is because if you fill out this, you're going to get some bonus weakness chance. And that's, I'd say, again, once you're at like 25% burn chance, you don't really need a lot more, because with all the different effects you're putting on, like, you're gonna be like applying burn like so fast, and like you really don't need more than maybe 20-25% burn chance. So I would definitely lean more into the weakness, which, as you'll see here, this is why I run the weakness ring. Earlier on, I definitely did run the burn one, but that was like early game. I was running that, and then later on, when I started speccing into the chaos tree, that's when I went for the weakness. I will say, with the rings, there's a lot of good rings, but I ran the stamina just because it's a Souls game. You need stamina. You're always out of stamina. Rolling, dodging, sprinting, everything. You just always need stamina. So I ran both of these the entire game. Never took them off. I actually, funny enough, I ran this for a little bit. It's nice. It'll let you get a few more casts in. Magic crit chance, which I don't even think I have that crafted, but the magic crit chance would be pretty good later on too. Funny enough, I just used the essence gain. In these games, I actually used the essence gain cloak as well, and it just allowed me to just, I don't know, it's one of those things where I like getting that extra 35% essence. It adds up, you know. That's why you can kind of tell I'm a pretty high level. I think this is probably a bit higher than most people are when they finish the game, and I think it's probably just because I was wearing these essence gain stuff. But obviously, as you can tell, like, you have flexibility. So that's more or less the skill trees. I want to go over some of these actual skills and my thoughts on them. So in this game, these skills, there's lots of skills, right? And you use this stuff called the entropic essence to upgrade them. Unfortunately, it's a very limited resource. You probably only really get enough of that entropic essence to upgrade maybe like 4 skills to max. So you have to be really picky and choosy about which ones you upgrade. And so I'm just going to give you my thoughts on which ones I used and which ones I recommend. So starting with Blazing Weapon. This is going to be one of the first ones you get, and it's probably one of the best. It just is really, really good. This adds, it's going to add so much damage to all of your attacks. Again, you're using your melee attack so much throughout the game that this just adds so much damage and so much value. I will say though, I wouldn't spec. Well, yeah, these are I'd say all of 3 of these are really good, especially at the end of the game. This is pretty good. Once you have more power, you're not going to have a ton of power in the mid of the game, but by the end game you should have more power, and this will be more effective. I would skip this, unless you. So there was a section of the game where I just really could not find a good like one-handed weapon. So I was actually running. I got this weapon, the Nightfall, and it has an S scaling. It just has a lot of a really high base damage. It already has some weakness on there, and it has that S scaling. So I was actually using this two-handed sword a lot, and the one skill I used with it was Impale. For whatever reason, even unupgraded, Impale is just like kind of a monster of a skill. It does so much damage. So I was kind of switching back and forth between, you know, casting some spells, and then I'd switch over. And even though I was like, you know, more of like a fire build, I was just kind of using this. And at that section of the game, it probably would have benefited me, or it would have benefited me to have this, because I could have cast fire on it. So I'll leave that up to you. I chose not to because I knew that I was going to go back to just using one hand as soon as I found a better one hand. So it's just kind of like one of those things where it's like, in that mid game, there's not a lot of really strong one-hander weapons, especially power scaling one-hander weapons. So I was just using kind of what the game gave me. So yeah, that's that, but I wouldn't actually upgrade any of these, right? I would save all my entropic essence for these skills later on. So this is a big one. After that, I mean, Firebolt, here's another early one. I'd say this one is a good skill, but I would definitely not upgrade these because, first of all, you're just always going to be applying burning. Like, it's so easy to apply burning with your skills that you don't need to spend 5,000 of your, really precious essence on this. However, this is very good. If you like this, which I will say, I started using this more and more in the end game because you can spam it pretty quick, and it hits really hard, honestly. This is very much worth it because it just is an overall DPS increase. It doesn't even increase the mana cost by that much more, and it gives it a little bit AoE. So it's a very powerful skill. I would definitely use it. It's just a very, very powerful skill and worth this one upgrade. After that, you get like Incinerate. I didn't use Incinerate, and part of the reason for that is because if you're casting Incinerate, I'll just show you how it works. If you're casting Incinerate, I can't do anything else. So not only am I stuck here sitting, but also I can't be attacking, right? So this all of a sudden becomes my damage, and I will say it's just not as strong as your basic attack. So I just don't really see it being a very effective skill. It just doesn't. It looks cool. I love flamethrowers, but it's unfortunately I don't think it's very good. Again, especially because the Flameweaver kind of has really strong like melee attack synergy skills, so you want to be using your melee attack. Another one is Firewall. So I actually really like Firewall. I ended up not. I think this adds up. Like you get this pretty early, and the damage this does really adds up, especially by the time you throw this on and you're attacking them. Like, you can really rack up the DPS really fast in the early game. So Firewall is a very good skill that I used early on. However, I wouldn't recommend upgrading it. And the reason for that is because these upgrades don't have a massive impact. I mean, slowing enemies is okay, but like a lot of enemies, especially bosses, they kind of jump away and will teleport and not be affected by it. 3 seconds longer is okay, but it kind of, makes the mana cost go way up. This would be nice, but again, 30% more width. This would be nice. If you were going to take one, I'd probably take this, especially since it's on the cheaper end. However, I will say I completely stopped using this once I got Infernal Tornado. And the reason for that is Infernal Tornado is just way, way, way stronger. This is, in my opinion, probably the strongest fire skill. And the reason is for that is because it just, look at this. It itself, without upgrades, is kind of like maybe not that impressive. But once you get these upgrades, like this will now leave fire on the ground, which it just, just lots of ticks of fire. I know it doesn't look like a lot, but it definitely adds up. The tornado itself, does damage, and it moves. So that the thing that's great about that compared to Firewall that just sits there, the Infernal Tornado is moving, which means as enemies move around and jump around, and the bosses especially, they're still going to be getting hit by it. They'll often like move into where the tornado is. So by the time you get all this, this one's a big one because enemies will always be burning. So it's just doing little explosions as it hits them. This one's great because now you just get 2. And the thing that's really cool about this is like if I cast it like this, I'm like up against the wall, it bounces off the wall, and now look at that. We got like 2 tornadoes going, and they're just like hitting and stacking. Like, look at that. That was one cast. The other great thing about this is that because it's kind of like a fire and forget skill, you just throw it, and while it's doing its thing, I can still be attacking and dodging. Like, this is how you stack damage on top of each other. So I think you get fire tornado kind of around the mid game, and it's definitely worth it. I would say it's one that you want to save your essence for and spend it on. The next one you get is, I think, Flame Slash. So Flame Slash, let me show you some things about Flame Slash. It looks really cool. I really like it. I like the design. I like the style of it. I like the concept too, but there's a couple things you want to look at and notice. First of all, and this is, I'll show you kind of why I think it's not that great. First of all, this is obviously not a worthwhile upgrade because you're gonna be scaling power. Maybe if you went for like a unique build where you were way more on the strength side of things and using strength scaling weapons, then this could be a good alternative. But I wouldn't, I just don't think it's that effective. Scaling the stagger is okay, but again, here's the big issue with this weapon, or this skill. So it says this counts as a weapon attack. That doesn't actually really add any damage. You'd think it does, but like you'll see here, let me just put this on and show you. So my basic attack is hitting for like, what is that, 321? The cast, that did do more, but like by the time in the end game when you have like a strong weapon, right, my attacks are hitting for like as much as this entire cast. And the thing about it is this attacks so much faster than using this. Like using this Flame Slash interrupts. And unlike a lot of the other spells, see, these other spells, they don't cost stamina. However, because this counts as a weapon attack, it does cost stamina. So that's like another reason why I don't like it. It just doesn't seem to hit that hard. 30% armor reduction looks good, but not a lot of enemies have a lot of armor. So if they don't have armor, as far as I can tell, it's not really doing anything. I don't think enemies can go into the negative armor. So it's just not that good. Honestly, at the end of the day, I found that even with this, when I was stacking it, so I upgraded it and I used it a bit, but it's like to actually stop and like even with 5 stacks, I mean, you're more or less getting to cast it for free. But it's like at this point, it's like I'm better off just continuing to attack. Like, why even use the skill at that point? So I found it to be, unfortunately, very disappointing. So I would definitely not recommend putting points into this. I wanted to test it to see if it would be good, but it's just not, in my opinion. And so Imp is a really good one for multiple reasons. For one, it's not on a timer, so as you're exploring, it's just gonna follow you around, and it has a certain number of uses. It's pretty mana efficient. The damage is not crazy, right? But it adds up, and the thing that's cool about it too is it will throw, and sometimes when you're exploring, like, you won't see an enemy, but it will, and it'll start throwing them. So it'll kind of alert you to certain enemies that you may not see, as well as being able to throw and hit enemies that you may not be able to hit. On top of that, the damage, if you grab this one where it goes from 8 to 12 charges, it becomes a pretty mana efficient skill, as well as this, which is just kind of nice because you always have it out. You might as well just let its damage scale up. It starts to hit a little bit harder by the end of its by the time it's time. But this is actually a really big deal because so much of your damage late game will start to kind of shift over to magic. Having this extra 10% magic crit chance is huge. As you can see, even with like end game gear, my magic crit chance is only 20%. And I could scale this up in the talent tree, which is something that I forgot to mention, but if you want to scale your damage more, probably just taking more crit chance is going to be better. But this just goes right along with that. It's just gonna add more crit chance, and again, you're just always gonna have it out. It's just, I found that it just becomes a really nice little companion that just kind of flies around and just attacks things. And again, while he's doing damage, you can still be doing your thing too. So it's like, I really value skills that are kind of like just fire and forget, right? You can just like, you put them on, you're getting a lot of value. By the time you're stacking all of this, the damage racks up so fast. All this burn damage, all these tornadoes, you got your little imp doing damage, and then meanwhile you're still hitting really hard with your melee attacks, right? So by the time you stack everything, this is why I think the Flameweaver is so strong, is because it's not just the damage of my melee attacks, it's not just the damage of my spells, you know, or imp. It's all of it combined, all doing damage at the same time. You're stacking, like, what is this, 3-4 different sources of damage all at the same time, and it's just, the DPS gets crazy at the end game. So yeah, back to these other skills. I'd say Fiery Rush is actually a pretty cool one. You get this more closer to the end of the game. Avatar of Fire and Fiery Rush. I didn't use them just because I kind of already had my skills I was using, you know. I used Firebolt, Tornado, Imp, and Blazing Weapon. And I'd say about 4 skills is kind of what you want to lean into for 2 reasons. One, you only have 2 weapon sets, and I pretty much always need the light attack on because so much of your damage comes from light attack. So that leaves like 4 slots for other spells. But also, you just don't really have enough essence to really like upgrade these weapons or these skills. So this is what I went with. I'd say Flame Wall is pretty good. Fire Rush can be pretty cool. Like this little explosion and the damage reduction would be nice. I don't think this would really be worth it. Because it's more of a utility skill. You'll see it gives you like iframes, and you I'll just show you. It's like you can be attacking and then, oops. You know, it gives you some nice little iframes, but you gotta be careful about spamming it because it becomes more expensive every cast. So it'll burn through your mana really fast if you're spamming it. So, so yeah, when I was looking at it, I wasn't sold, but you may get some mileage if you want to go for Fiery Rush instead of, I don't know, one of these other ones. Try it out. Avatar of Fire is another. This might be like I think this is the very last one you get, and honestly, to me, it's just not worth it because, yeah, it does increase your fire damage. By the time you upgrade it, if you upgrade it, it becomes a very expensive spell, mana-wise, as well as doing the real issue here is that it increases the damage you take by a lot. Like, all non-fire damage you take is now buffed by like 20%. And this fire damage taken, 50%, the thing that's weird about this is you're gonna get this after you've fought the big boss in the game that does a ton of fire damage. So it's like, okay, that's cool, but you're not, by the time you get this, you're not really going to encounter any enemies that do a lot of fire damage. I mean, I guess there are a few in the last area of the game, but still, like, you're going to be taking more damage from everything else, and I just don't think it's worth it, especially by the time it's like you'd have to be giving up one of your other spells in order to use it. So yeah, that's pretty much where in the end game, this is more or less my setup. I ran, where is it? Firebolt just for the, imp, and I'd cast some firebolts, hit lots of crits, and then, I'd be casting this. Well, I'm out of mana now, but, firewalls, it really, like, the damage racks up really fast. So yeah, that's more or less the build. I wanted to kind of talk you through some of like the decisions. I'll go over gear real fast. Pretty much head and hands. These are the ones that matter throughout the game. These are the ones that give you like the burn chance. So I'd say earlier on I was using the Scarlet Militia. You can craft this pretty early, and this is great. Just use this because it gives you burn chance, some defense armor. So things like this, if you get the Assassin's Hood, some movement speed, crit damage is fine. Uh, Again, the armor in this game is like nothing crazy, but I'd say these ones matter. And then when you can eventually craft the Burning Legionnaire, this is going to be closer to like the end of the game. This is great because between these two, not only are you getting 12% burn chance, but you're getting that 15% fire damage, and that's going to add up. That's going to multiply all the damage you deal by 15%, and that's a pretty big chunky multiplier. For chest piece, I just honestly just ran because it doesn't have like any specific stats like burn or crit or anything. All these chest pieces, they're just gonna have mostly just like random stats. I kind of just equipped the heaviest one I could, and to stay below 100% equip load. You want to stay below 100% equip load just so you have a good dodge. And again, your dodge is your best defensive option. So whatever you want to run, I do some of this, and obviously just enchant it with whatever you can. I like earlier on I had to use a lot of like the vigor, the stuff for vigor to stay below 100% equip load if I was running some of this heavier armor. But then I enchanted it with like power because it just, I wanted power later on. Same with legs, just honestly like you can get away with whatever you can fit in there with the best stats. If you find something like this is actually not bad, like some stamina, really nice, but it gives you dexterity, which you don't use. So yeah, honestly the armor is just kind of whatever in this game. So yeah, as far as weapons, these talismans, you're just always going to equip the best one you can. Just craft or whatever you find, just whatever has the highest spell power. Some of these, like this one is actually really good. It gives you pretty crazy crit chance. So I'd maybe argue that it's maybe even better than this. But the 90 in mana is kind of nice. And so I don't know. Either of these are really good, but these are like the most end game ones. Throughout the game, I'd prioritize anything with like burn chance and crit chance over just like mana, but they're all good. Just whatever you can work with. Again, for weapons, earlier on it's going to be Amnesia. Like this weapon's probably the weapon I used for like almost half the game. And it did start to fall off because it was just like really hard to find other weapons. I started using weapons like this. It has no power scaling, but the base damage of it was just so much higher than Amnesia. At least at that point in the game where I found this. And this is kind of later on too. Even like this I used for a while. It has a tiny bit of power scaling, but mostly it's just the base damage was high. So it's, in a way, the scaling matters a lot less throughout most of the game. It's really not until you get to the end game. So eventually, the two weapons that I'll point out, these are both pretty end game weapons, is this one right here, the Blade of Despair, which you find some recipe, I can't remember where, but it's pretty late game weapon. You find a recipe for it, and you can craft it. And this one, which you'll get from a boss. This weapon is really good. Obviously it has the S+ scaling, it has the burn chance and burn damage. However, even though this weapon over here, as you'll see, the difference in power seems really high. Like this one hits for 507, whereas the Blade of Despair hits for 371. I still prefer Blade of Despair for two reasons. One, it attacks way faster and costs a lot less stamina for attack, which in my opinion makes the damage stat a little bit misleading. You're probably going to be pretty comparable in DPS if you're just to spam. I'll just honestly show you. So I'm swinging like this, hitting pretty fast, right? I can switch over to this, and it's definitely slower, right? The other thing is, I think magic crit chance and crit damage are way more powerful effects than just burn chance and burn damage. you're not like the burn itself isn't going to be a big source of damage, and again, you don't really need more than 20-25% burn chance because because of all the different applications of like burn that you're applying. It's really easy to burn enemies. So this is a good one, and funny enough, I think you can actually get Blade of Despair before this if you find the recipe. So just make sure you're exploring everything, and eventually you'll be able to craft it. But yeah, that pretty much does it. Um, the build it turns out to be really strong. You're doing lots of different things. I know this is kind of a longer video, but I watched other guides, and a lot of people just kind of like, showed like super end game builds, and I kind of wanted to walk you through, kind of what I did in the early game, because, honestly, like, the end game builds are cool, but there is no end game to this game. Like, once you reach the end game, you beat the boss, that's it. The game's over. So these end game builds are kind of like don't matter a whole lot. What matters more is like, oh, like what works as you're actually playing through the game. So that's why I kind of wanted to show you, like, hey, see, these are some of the key nodes that I used as I was playing through, the priority in which I hit them in order to, kind of, and the reasons why, right? And it worked really well for me. I really didn't have too many problems, with the exception of like that mid game where I just couldn't find a good weapon. So that's why I was just using this two-hander, which it did work really well. And honestly, like, there's no reason not to experiment and explore. It's kind of like what's fun about these games, just trying different things. I would just say the biggest thing, fortunately, everything you can try out and test so many different things. Other than these skills, the biggest like limiting factor in creating builds in this game is this entropic essence. So this is where I'd say really, think about what you want to be doing in the end game, or maybe like, halfway through the game, because if you're not able, like for Infernal Tornado, for example, if you had spent all your essence on like random other stuff, things over here in the combat tree or things in the chaos tree, and you didn't have enough essence to get all of this, this skill just isn't going to be very effective. I'd say the same thing with the Imp. The Imp's not really that great without its upgrades. Same with Blazing Weapon. Blazing Weapon really needs its upgrades to be kind of worth using. And so, because you can't respec these, and it's a limited source, just, I wanted to kind of give you the rundown on like why I chose these skills, and just like how powerful they really are in the end game. You can just stack just crazy amounts of damage by the time you get all of this going, just boom, just like blast through. But yeah, I know this has been a long video, and I hope you guys learned something. The game's not really overly complex, but there's a lot of little things going on that can go into how you build a character. And the game's actually not that easy. It can be kind of challenging. It's not like super hard. I'd say it's maybe easier than like your average Souls game, but it's 2D. It's a little different. But I had a lot of fun. I really loved this hybrid caster melee playstyle. It worked pretty well. I'd say it worked really well. I haven't tried some of the other builds. Well, that's not true. I actually did kind of respec and try like a full warrior tree and kind of like a full like assassin tree. And I'd say both of those were actually quite a bit weaker. They did not seem to pack the punch that this like Flameweaver kind of build did. So I really feel like this game favors magic, especially at the end of the game. However, again, like I said, like most of this game, is playing through the game and fighting the bosses as you go. So you're not gonna just have this crazy end game build. So your experience is gonna be different as you actually go through the game versus what it's like at the end of the game. Whereas again, the end game doesn't really matter because there is no end game. But yeah, that's pretty much been my my experience with the game. I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this class, and I hope that you learned something watching this video. Thank you.